And welcome to another edition of the Nerdy Agent Podcast. I'm your host, Luke, with my brothers and fellow nerds, AJ
the gang's
and
back
Josh.
together.
Yeah, this is all three of us. It's
the boys are back in town.
It was quite a fun weekend talking.
We should start making more songs like that. I thought you were going for I thought you were going for the High School Musical one at first.
No,
there.
I always joke. It's like it's such a dad thing. Like you have a few kids and then the dad jokes just really ramp up. Luke's already getting pretty good at them just with one. But every time someone says something, I think of like a line from a comedian or a line from a movie or a song, and then I just say it, or I play the clip, and everybody's a little happier afterwards.
Every single time I walk into a room and a client says, "This would be a great office," I go,
or a nursery. What I found is those jokes that I think are like really clever, most people think are not funny,
they're
at,
not
all.
funny at all.
And I'm
I
like,
still
this
think
is a
funny
really
to
good one.
It's probably because we're way funnier than the average person,
Exactly.
or maybe we're way less funny than the average person.
Well-
That's probably more likely.
Well, it was a great weekend in Minnesota. The Minnesota Wild won on the previous Thursday, and now they're up 2-1 in that series. I think they played another one, and now they're up 3-1 as well.
I love how we give sports updates like a week behind.
The
every
Minnesota
time.
Timberwolves took both home games against the Lakers and are also up 3-1 going back to LA. They're both probably going to advance to the second round. It looks like this week.
I wanted to go to one of those games so bad. I was going to take.
We're
my
going
neighbor,
Sunday.
Brent. Do you know how much money those tickets are right now?
Yeah, we made a lot of money on ours.
I can't find a ticket in the lower bowl for under like $600 right now.
You should have bought mine.
Holy cow.
Nobody's buying the ones at $600.
$545 bucks for
you're
like,
talking plus fees. Because the fees are ridiculous.
Maybe
on the
that's
app.
why. I think StubHub had to include them now with that like latest bill or whatever. So
The
it's like
fees are insane.
to
on
sit
Timberwolves
in
app.
like row Z.
Mine were only $375 a piece.
Oh man, I should look on the T-Wolves app. shouldn't I?
$500 with the T-Wolves app is where the fees are ridiculous.
This is exactly what everyone
StubHub.
wants to hear.
StubHub.
Sorry, let's
I think this is great.
so they're all winning and Minnesota sports are great.
Inflation, man.
This week, we are going to talk about the stuff that actually matters. We're going to talk about the affordability index a little bit, talk about renting versus buying, and then also give some tips on if we were first-time home buyers right now, what we might be looking to try to do. To start, do you want to just rip off the affordability index number? Do you remember what it was?
Yeah, we've talked about the affordability index on this podcast a number of times, so we don't want to like rehash everything. If you're not familiar with it or you're newer to us, you can go back in time and find the podcast titled Affordability Index. But in essence, it's measuring how affordable is housing right now in the metro, looking at mortgage rates, looking at average incomes, and
I
kind
think
of
this is a national.
But they publish it locally too,
Oh, they
right?
do,
So
okay.
we get the local number. So our 118 that we have right now in the Minnesota market is where we're at. That number pre-COVID was kind of in the 150 range, meaning higher affordability index means more affordable real estate. Lower means less affordable. It's been tracking at 117 on a 12-month rolling average. So we've seen it relatively flat to where it had been previously. But what it's done is as the affordability index has gone down, which is largely driven by both the fact that real estate prices are still going up. We were up, another 4 or 5% again last month, year over year. And that mortgage rates are going up. When you have both of those things happening at the same time, your monthly payment is kind of getting hit with a double whammy. And so
just the 118 means that someone who makes the media area income can afford 118% of the median area price. Correct. Okay. Just so they know that.
Yep. And so that's been an interesting conundrum as that number has come down. Obviously, us as owners of real estate rental property have seen the other side of that, which is, okay, what does that do to rents? What does that do to that market? How are our clients thinking about buying versus renting when, if they would have bought 5 years ago, what felt like an unaffordable house actually would have been a lot more affordable than what they're buying today.
Yeah, I mean, it's so rate driven. And I think the one thing for everybody to note too is I believe that affordability index is off of like a conventional max DTI at the current rate. Right?
That would make sense.
Yeah. And
probably
so
43 to 45%.
right.
DTI.
And so when you look at that, sometimes that's kind of a skewy number because one person might say, well, that's pretty good. They can afford way more than the median priced house. But that's taking into account like no debt plus
maxing out your budget.
I run the calculation with my clients a lot, and I run the DTI calculation because they'll say, well, I don't know, what we're going to qualify for. We want our monthly payment to be this. And I'm like, well, let's just run this. And they're like, holy crap, we could buy, that's what our monthly mortgage payment is.
Yeah, the DTI component's a whole separate conversation in terms
exactly.
of budgets versus how much you're putting into
Well,
housing.
and it's so fascinating to me too because of the way that our tax system works, that we have a progressive tax system. but the DTI number is based off of your gross
Pre-tax
income. And
as
I
well.
feel like they could do a calculation that would maybe take into account the actual after-tax part, because like for someone in those super low brackets, 43% might not be that much when they're paying 10% in taxes. But for someone that's paying 25% in taxes, it's a lot
It's a fair
different.
point.
We're going to get in a rabbit hole here, but I don't think they really care about anything other than the statistics on how much money will they pay us and be able to continue to pay us so we can make interest.
Well, right, but like
that's probably why.
But presumably, like the ability to continue to pay would be dependent on their after-tax income way more than their pre-tax
100%.
income.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
It's super interesting. I've always said that when I've been working with clients that are at the higher end of.
There's a whole bunch of weird things like that, like appraisals not considering the down payment. Super weird.
Yeah.
I have a client right now who's getting a $57,000 mortgage on a $390,000 house, and she paid $500 for an appraisal that got denied.
They didn't
The
get an
waiver.
appraisal waiver.
Denied.
I got an appraisal waiver on a 5% down house yesterday.
Well, we went way over list price, so I think that's right. But I was
It's
like,
like-
you guys are making my client pay $500 for it? The sellers are like upset they have to leave the house. Like, why is there an appraisal? And I was like, we don't know.
keeping the economy moving.
It's insane. So then we also want to talk about the rent. We got a little bit in a rabbit hole.
Yeah,
And
so we basically looked at this and we said, okay, so as affordability comes down, what happens is buyers have to look at this and go, am I going to buy or am I going to rent? That conversation historically before this has never been really a conversation because equity growth continues to be really strong. That is something that buyers should be considering for sure. But even like historically, rental rates have been higher than mortgage rates. Because why would investors buy property and then rent them at a loss? And so that has always made sense that you'd have a markup there. But what we've seen happen in the last few years is rental rates have kind of stagnated, even as mortgage rates on average have gone up considerably because the actual rate itself has gone up and the purchase prices of these houses have gone up. The hypothesis I've had as this has been going on has been, with the economy more generally at a macro level, there's only so much money, right? So people have more pressure on their budgets than they've had, going back to even the COVID years, because you've got inflation that's kind of run pretty rampant. You've got higher prices on real estate. You've got higher interest rates. You've got, like everyone's life is just more expensive than it was before. And so if you're a renter, you're looking at, you're going like, I would love to pay more for, like I have a nicer place and pay more, but at some point I only have so much money. And so I think, and you've got an inventory shortage on the buy side in terms of what they could buy. So the people that want to buy a house can still buy a house that can afford to, but those that struggle to win or find a house they can buy have to rent, but they're probably the ones that, once again, from a budgetary standpoint, are a little more squeezed.
I also think it's worth noting that this is not simply a decision between buying and renting. And that's what makes it so complicated is like you have the decision between buying a house, renting a house by yourself, renting a house with two friends, renting a house with three friends,
living with your parents,
buying a house and having one of your friends rent a bedroom,
buying a house and having your friends rent a bedroom, moving to a new market because the market's better for renting there and you can work from home. So there's so much of this that goes on that leads to what Josh is describing as the rents haven't really gone up that much, even though the cost of housing and the rate has gone up a ton. And I also think the landlords are willing to take on these rates that have stagnated because they're locked in at interest rates that are much lower than what the buyers.
They're still
could get
cash flowing,
today,
the
right?
current landlords.
Yeah. So it's a fascinating thing to look at. It's almost like you're at the breaking point, if you will, like the tipping point of like this can't really, like the rents can't go up in today's market because there's not enough space or money flowing around for it to happen.
There's also the conversation surrounding commercial investment prior to, this time frame where there was a lot of apartment buildings getting built, et cetera. Now everyone's going, oh, now we got to fill these. So there's more pressure on the investment side as well. But an interesting fact from this note, this article, it's that we were just reading this morning. It's cheaper to rent than buy in the 50 largest U.S. metros, which is really interesting. It has not historically been that way.
Is Minneapolis in one of the
to
are the
be.
Twin Cities? We must be in the top 50.
Well, I mean, think of our rental properties now. The amount that we get for rent for our rental properties versus if we were to buy them today, there's no way.
No, it's gonna be higher.
So it's you can't really buy investment properties the way you used to. Like I had clients 5 years ago that I was like, you should just buy this because you could rent it for more and make money on it and then hold it and it works. But you can't find that anymore. Average monthly mortgage payment for median priced home rose 2.4% year over year nationally, which actually feels really low to me. Average rents stayed stagnant.
Nationally is tough because there's going to be That was average, too.
Average.
Yeah, so there's gonna be a lot of outliers that. Can
But I think
drive
it's
that
it's
down.
locally
Probably
we've
has
seen the
gone
same thing, right? Where average mortgage payments are going up and rents are like our rents are relatively flat year over year.
if not a little negative.
And
on
you've
some of
got
them.
insurance increases, you've got tax increases, you got all that stuff on top of it. So I guess the question becomes then, how do you talk to first-time homebuyers, or how do you talk to homebuyers about this, right? Like, what is the strategy? Is it better to rent? Is it better not to?
So the tough part, I would say, especially in the Twin Cities metro, is that it's hard. We're in this situation in the economy and the housing market and everything where it feels like we're in this like spiral that's almost impossible to get out of
From a shortage standpoint?
from everything perspective. So like right now you're saying, well, it's pretty unaffordable to buy a house. Well, if the interest rates go down, which feasibly make it more affordable to buy a house, the prices are going to go up, and it's just going to stay the same.
I've had the argument for a while that I think there is a lower than today's rate where we don't have more appreciation necessarily.
It has to jump to it fast though, and I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think you're right. If we went to
5.5.
3% mortgage rates tomorrow, it would be absolute calamity. But you'd also see
You still have a lower monthly payment, though.
At 3%, that'd be.
That's
good.
what I'm saying, right? Like if it went all the way down to that, you'd see the prices in our market probably do what they did in 2020 and 2021, early 2022.
But that rate is so much lower that your payment actually might be more affordable at 3%.
It would be.
It might, unless you see this constant
I guess
drop
the
and
prices
drop
might.
and bump and drop and bump and drop and bump, and it can get really screwy from an inflationary perspective.
I think the conversation that I've had with like my first time homebuyers when it comes to this stuff is right now, the supply shortage is still very real. We're still at lower levels than we've really ever been historically pre-COVID years. There's not a lot of signs, as we talked about on prior podcasts, that there's going to suddenly be more inventory. In fact, with some of the things going on around tariffs, et cetera, that may impact building materials, like I think there's more fear on the building side, which will probably slow construction down in the near future, which means that we don't have an immediate fix to the supply solution, which means that if you want to buy a house at some point, the train, the way it's going right now, seems like it's going to continue to move forward. It may feel very unaffordable right now compared to, say, like an option like renting, but it's going to likely continue to feel that way. So there's not like it's like the stock market. There's not like a perfect time to just time the stock market. You know, it goes up and down. There's things that shift. The difference between this and the stock market is this seems to be going up more consistently even than that. So if you're wanting to own a house and you're wanting to get the benefits of homeownership, while it might not be a perfect time to buy, and you might look back at your parents or people that bought 5-6 years ago and be like, I wish I was them, it doesn't necessarily mean that you shouldn't be doing it, because there's not a lot of things or signs out there suggesting that it's going to get better than it is right now.
Yeah, well, and I think too, the main thing I talk about with buyers, when you're working with the seller, like I told Luke, I have 3 listing presentations today. I talk to them about the market. The market is what matters to a seller.
Yes.
What are the buyers doing right now in my area, in my price point for a house like mine? You're subject to at least the local macro market. When you're a buyer, you are far less subject to the local macro market. And now some people may say, well, I'm in multiple offers every weekend, so I'm dealing with these other buyers out there. It's like, yeah, that's true, but you're only buying one house. So you just have to find one house. The seller has to take on all the buyers in the pool of that area and hope that one of them wants to buy it at the price that they want for it. If you're a buyer and you can find a house that, and it's always funny, our operations guy, Ryan, always gets mad when I use the word arbitrage. You can find a house that is an arbitrage opportunity because you can see, if you do it long enough, how many houses are getting multiple offers, which ones are getting multiple offers, what prices they're selling for, and then try and find a house that doesn't look like those ones. That's an option. And I think finding a home that maybe isn't perfect as a first-time home buyer is the number one opportunity right now, something that you can add value to. Whoa, is everyone okay? Something that you can add value to is important, and I think that's where that micro versus macro comes into play with buyers.
Yeah, and I think it's also the conversation we always have is when you think about buying a house, think about whether or not this fits within your life and your budget, right? So I want you to be thoughtful about, does this not like, is it better than this or that or how these other things? Because your best option is probably like, I want to live with my parents forever because it's free, right? But like, does it fit within your budget today? Do you feel like if you purchased this property today that you would still feel comfortable with your rest of your life? Like you'd be able to go on your vacations, you'd be able to take buy the things you want to do, go out to dinner, et cetera. And if that is the case, then it fits, right? And so long as it fits today, you know that it can fit for 30 years. It's a good decision to move forward with, right? Because there's opportunity for growth and equity. There's opportunity to theoretically, potentially refinance in the future if rates go down. But you're kind of locking that into your budget. And as long as it works, then you're giving yourself all the opportunities for home ownership while still maintaining a budget you feel comfortable with.
Well, and that's what I think is so funny is all those articles, they're a little clickbaity to me when they say, well, renting is cheaper than buying, you should rent. And it's like, yes, that is maybe true, but now you're paying into a piggy bank that you have no access to. So there's still this function of Americans are pretty poor at saving money, and putting the money into your own piggy bank maybe would be a better decision long term. And if you're going to live somewhere, like to Josh's point, for a very long time, I don't know if there's ever been a moment in U.S. history, maybe the Great Depression and the housing crisis, that you could do a 20-year span of time and say that the housing prices on a macro level in our country went down. I think they've always gone up if you look at it from a 20-year vantage point. We can double check and fact check that. Most of the time, real estate goes up 2, 3 to 5% a year. And if you're renting, yeah, sure, maybe you're paying less today, and maybe this flips over in another day and you can decide to buy or rent or whatever, that decision point comes in. But if you bought right now, there's no argument to be made that, you can't argue against the fact that you're paying $200, $300 a month in principal. The equity is kind of going up a little bit. You get a little bit of tax benefit from it.
You only have to put a percentage down versus the whole amount down. So if it goes up 3% and you're 3% down, you actually made 100% of your money.
Exactly. So I think that's something that's important to talk to with people.
If you were a first-time home buyer right now, what would you do?
I'd buy the crappiest
Where?
house I can find.
Where? Anywhere?
I'd probably look, honestly, I'm a West Side guy, so I'd probably look Robbinsdale, Crystal, or New Hope, depending on the price point I was looking in. St. Louis Park, we've seen has kind of it's trying to bump up against a certain ceiling of price point. I still think there's probably some room to run. You get to Northern Golden Valley, Robbinsdale, Crystal, New Hope, that's very similar housing stock, and plenty of homes with maybe older folks moving into senior housing that really haven't done a lot of cosmetic updates where you can add some value.
Yeah, it all depends on obviously where your budget is and where your family life is.
Well, a first-time home buyer, you're looking under $350.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you're wanting to be in the areas where you believe that the prices are already higher. So wherever you can get in at the bottom of that market is a good thing. So if you could get into
you also have to live there.
Yeah, but if you get into a St. Louis Park that's livable at $325 and you can work on it over 5 to 7 years. Like I had a client buy at $290 in St. Louis Park a year and a half ago. Great. The house needed a lot of work, but they were able to get the perfect neighborhood right over by Oak Hill. And they're like, this location's incredible, so I'll just work on this and live in it. And it's good enough for us, but it needs work and energy. But if they really do the work on that house, they're going to make a ton of money on that over the next 5 years. So buying in the area is the most important thing that I would think about. But also some of these other areas that are more up and coming because people have gotten priced out of these other locations like we're talking about would be the secondary option that I'd be considering. But I'd be focusing on I wouldn't buy a condo, I'd buy a single family house.
Or owner-occupied multifamily, Luke? Still some options there?
Owner-occupied multifamily, actually, from a pricing perspective, probably makes more sense.
Yeah, it's probably still quite right in there.
The prices haven't appreciated. Our duplex really hasn't been going up.
That's because the rents aren't
going up. Exactly. So it is something that is pretty advantageous.
Well, again, you look at what's your competition, right? And you go to Crystal Robbinsdale, and it's at $350. It's a ton of people just like you. I do tell buyers a lot of times, why don't we look in an area where the buyer isn't just like you? Now we're competing with a different subset of the market, and they're going to either value it higher or lower, but at least it gives us a chance.
The flip side to that, though, is if you're only going to stay there for 5 years, in 5 years, there'll be a lot more buyers just like you that want to buy your house when you do get a win.
Exactly.
If you can't find a win, it's a different conversation. But if you can get a win, your appreciation on a duplex in 5 years won't necessarily be what you can get on a single family. So if you can buy a house that you know will be desirable forever, that's what you want to buy.
You know what? I'm changing my answer then. So it was going to be, and I'm biased to South Minneapolis, but it was going to be a single family house near the Nokomis area in South Minneapolis that has 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom,
unfinished basement.
I'm going to at least need a 1-car garage with unfinished basement. I'm going to rent one of the bedrooms to a friend. But now I'm switching that because I'm trying to convince Caitlin. I don't think it's going to happen this year. I'm buying an owner-occupied duplex, and I'm living in the bigger unit that has more than 1 bedroom, renting one of those bedrooms, and short-term Airbnb the other unit.
That's also an interesting option.
Short-term Airbnb right now.
Non-conforming bedroom?
No, it's still a bedroom.
Okay.
Still bedroom.
Got it.
Because I'm living in my unit, renting the other bedroom in my unit, and short-term Airbnb in the other one, and you're covering the entire mortgage, I bet.
It's very possible depending on the marketplace that you're in.
Short-term Airbnb right now is still dominating.
I'm listing an Airbnb next week.
Are you?
Yeah.
That's sweet.
Because they hated working with Airbnb.
I wanna rent. Well, you got to get so check this one. I have someone who just bought a triplex in the Wedge, and they're Airbnb one of them because previous owner was Airbnb all three, which isn't allowed.
Not allowed.
Apparently Minneapolis doesn't come for you. I was like, that's not what you should do. He has someone he's working with, this guy. He takes 10% and runs the whole thing.
Oh, that's kind of nifty.
That's fantastic.
I was like, well, so you're telling me if you were going to get $1,000 on that and now you get $2,000 because you Airbnb it, you give him 10%, your net is massively higher.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a good setup.
That's all we have this week on the Nerdy Agent Podcast. Good job, Timberwolves. Good job, Wild. And as always, remember, be better.